costs that people and businesses are now facing. So the Scottish Government said they're going to introduce a rent freeze on all public and private rental buildings. They're going to extend the child payment scheme here in Scotland, and that's it's a benefits-related scheme. It's available to families on low incomes. It'll be extended to all children under 16, and families will now receive £25 a week for every eligible child. She announced that the fares on the nationalised Railway network here in Scotland will be frozen for several months. But she did point out, she said that there was a limit to what the Scottish Government could do, because the budget is £1.7 billion less than it was when it was published last December, and that the public pay sector deals that have been settled so far have cost £700 million more than have been budgeted for. She says the powers on the scale required to deal with this crisis do not lie with this Parliament here in Edinburgh, they lie with Westminster. So of course she's pushing Liz Truss to do more to tackle the energy crisis. That's a reserved area, and to use those fiscal levers we keep hearing about. She wants them to be used, but of course ultimately she wants those powers to rest with the Parliament here in Edinburgh, which Liz Truss has said no to a second independence referendum. And in response to the speech here this afternoon, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, Douglas Ross, said this was the worst possible priority, a second independence referendum, at the worst possible time. So independence still a priority for Nicola Sturgeon, who leads that SNP Green administration here in Edinburgh, but also tackling this cost of living crisis, which she has described as a humanitarian crisis. They're using very strong language here now, the SNP, to frame this crisis going forward. They're trying to put pressure on Liz Truss, and of course arguing repeatedly that they believe the best way to deal with this crisis would be if Scotland were independent.
Lorna, many thanks for setting the themes out for us there. Lorna Gordon, our Scotland correspondent, and we're still reminded, of course, of the fact that the Scotland landscape, the political landscape in Scotland, is yet another big challenge for the incoming Prime Minister, Liz Truss, whose car is now making its way with the police escort along the Westway, towards the Westway as it's called, the main route leading out of London towards Oxford, and it's making its way pretty speedily. Lots of the traffic has been stopped. I'm trying to get my bearings here, Nick, because I'm trying to work out exactly where they are on this road, and I don't think they've approached the White City section yet. They're turning off to the right. They'll have a pretty intricate route worked out, of course, but at the rate they're moving, they won't be that long before they get towards central London itself. And as we can see, all the roads have been cleared, so they're making their way down, I guess, towards Shepherd's Bush. Actually, I think that's the way they're going. But as they're making their way down, we've already discussed the priorities in Northern Ireland, and we've discussed some of the challenges in Scotland. Mark Drakeford, of course, in Wales is leading the only Labour administration in the UK in national terms, and the First Minister there will have his own thoughts on this change of administration in Downing Street, this change of Prime Minister in Downing Street. So Howell Griffith is my colleague in Cardiff, and we'll stay on these images of the Prime Minister's cars making their way down towards central London. I'll bring Howell in over these images, just to give us a sense, Howell, of the perspective in Cardiff on what's going on here in London.
Well, here, as you point out, Wales has been run by Labour for over 20 years now, and previous Prime Ministers have often pointed over Offa's-Dyke as an example of how Labour runs public services, particularly when it wants to suggest that waiting times are longer, that educational attainment is lower. Will Liz Truss choose a different tack? So far, what we heard during the hustings for the leadership contest suggested not. She went as far as describing Mark Drakeford as a low-energy Jeremy Corbyn. Certainly their worldview is very different. She doesn't believe in redistribution. That is key to how Mark Drakeford sees the future for Wales. But there is something they have in common. They're both unionists. Both say they believe in the future of a united kingdom. There is, however, a different view of what Liz Truss will do for Wales. Plaid Cymru yesterday welcomed her succession as Tory party leader, saying she would be Britain's last Prime Minister. They think potentially under Liz Truss, as under Boris Johnson, there could be continued interest and increasing interest in independence for Wales. Nothing like the sentiments we've seen in Scotland, but Plaid Cymru see that as the future. The future of the relationship may come down to who she appoints as Welsh Secretary. We'll probably find out over the next 24 hours who takes that seat in the Cabinet. Will it be Sir Robert Buckland, the man who came in 2 months ago, initially supported Rishi Sunak, then flipped a few weeks ago to say he supported Liz Truss? The problem there may be that although he is Welsh and is well liked amongst Welsh Tories, he's not a Welsh MP. His constituency in England, what message would that send to people in Wales that someone who represents a Welsh constituency isn't the Welsh Secretary? She may give us the answer on that. Maybe not on the steps of Downing Street, but probably within the next 24 hours.
Indeed, Howell. Another intriguing